here. Don't hide behind it. Good morning to you all, and good morning to members of the national community who may have joined us again. This is a continuation of a press conference which we had last Friday. And I want to make it very clear because, I mean, we have some very experimenting people among us. Last Friday when I came here specifically to report on the complex issues that we were dealing with on the trip abroad, I did not take a question from you with respect to the Commissioner of Police, who was making the news at the time while I was away. And I did explain to you the main reason for that is that I really wanted the country to focus on the details of that trip. And I knew that you could have chosen to have done otherwise, so I offered to come today so we can spend a bit more time specifically on the matter of national security. I did not intend, when I said that, to indicate that I was coming here to fire any minister or to fire the Commissioner of Police or to do any such thing. What I said was I was going to give you time to put your questions to me and also to give me an opportunity to deal more expansively with this whole question or the series of questions surrounding the issue of national security, which is a paramount issue in Trinidad and Tobago today. So we're here. And I would like to represent the government's position on our understanding of the responsibility of national security. It is the position of this government that, and I'm going way back to 2015 when we came into office, that the government saw national security as a priority, and that the government understood that in the division of labor in the cabinet, national security was one of many very important arms of state, and those officers of state who are responsible for the children are called teachers, and they're in the Ministry of Education. Those who are responsible for the country's health, they are under the Ministry of Health, and they are doctors and so in hospital. Those who are responsible for roads and drains, they're in the Ministry of Works, and those who are responsible for national security are in the Ministry of National Security, and they are mainly the police service and the rest of the national security apparatus. That's how we saw it, and that's how we continue to see it. And one of the things that we understood then was the need to have a proper, data-driven, clear understanding of the country's ability to provide that national security and safety. And to do that, we had to look at the policing, the quality and quantity and nature of the policing of the country. Because it doesn't matter how much we print in the newspapers, how much we talk on political platforms and whatever. At the end of the day, the arm and the tool of the state to respond to the criminal element in the country, the Constitution puts that responsibility in the hands of the police service and other arms of the security of the state. And we understood that, and we function in that way. And that is why I brought here today this document, which I don't know if you all are familiar with as members of the media. You all should be familiar with this document. This document is the final report of the cabinet-appointed committee to conduct a manpower audit into Trinidad and Tobago's police service. And it was presented to the cabinet after the cabinet had selected the following people to look at the police service, the manpower audit of the police service. That is what the government set out. That was our first foot forward as a government, requiring to deal with what was already runaway criminality and violence and murders in this country. And knowing that the police service was the arm of the state that would stand between us and that situation, we conducted a manpower audit. This thing was chaired by Professor Ramesh Deusaran. And on his committee was Mr. Harold Phillip, an acting commissioner of police from the Trinidad and Tobago Police Service. Mr. Alan Miguel, an attorney at law with specialist qualification and interest in policing. Mrs. Jacqueline Wilson, a permanent secretary, recently retired. Mr. Anand Ramisa, an acting assistant superintendent of police, representing the TTP-SSWA. Dr. Levis Guy Obiakor, a security management consultant. Dr. Zamir Mohammed, assistant vice president of UTT. And Mrs. Erla Christopher, acting deputy commissioner of police. These were the people who the cabinet in 2017 put together to do a manpower assessment of the Trinidad and Tobago Police Service. And this morning, I think it is valuable to ask members of the media whether, in fact, you've ever read this report. Are you aware of it? Because, you see, it was laid in the Parliament on October. It was received, the report of the committee. This committee worked, and its report was received on the 17th of October, 2017. This report was laid in the Parliament on the 11th of November, 2017. It was laid in the Senate on the 28th of November, 2017. And it was referred to a Joint Select Committee on National Security in the Parliament in November 2017. So you see how expeditiously it got into the Parliament and what was done with it. The committee had reported in July. So it reported in July, the cabinet had a look at it, the cabinet went over it, members of the cabinet became familiar with it, and it was put in the public domain. This is a public document. I think it's important that this morning, for the benefit of the public and to re-engage you, members of the media, that I should quote a few paragraphs from this report so that we will have a good idea of what the government and what the country has been dealing with, was required to deal with, and is dealing with. Because, you see, I understand very well, and I appreciate the concerns of the public and the conversations that are every day in front of us on safety, security, mainly murders. But the root of it lies in this understanding. What do we do about it? Who is doing about it? What do we do about what we're doing about it? Let me just quote, I'll just run through, there's an executive summary from page 11 to page 43 is the executive summary. So you don't have to read the whole report. And I'll be surprised if there are members in the media who are following this thing on a daily basis who would not, at some point in time, would have consulted this document. But I must say, I'm a little surprised that I don't see any reference to it at all in the volume of conversation and script that is going down now about safety and security in this country. Because this document is extremely important because it guides the cabinet, it guides the government, and it ought to guide the country. A manpower audit in the police service. And on page 12, paragraph 6, these are the findings of that audit group. The Trinidad and Tobago Police Service is in a very troubled and wounded state. Remember, this is at a time when there's an explosion in violence and criminality in the country, guns, ammunition, murder, shooting, fight. And this, in 2017, October, the cabinet receives this analysis from that committee saying that the Trinidad and Tobago Police Service is in a very troubled and wounded state. It goes on to say that to come to that conclusion, the committee interviewed 500 officers randomly, selected across ranks. And for example, when I asked what they thought of the Trinidad and Tobago Police Service, whether it is satisfactorily organized, to deal effectively with crime, over half, which is 54% of the officers, said very unsatisfactory or unsatisfactory. It also determined, if I go to another paragraph, paragraph 8, that it's estimated that a daily average of 1,400 officers are on patrol or outside duty in the country. 1,400 officers. This is where we have an establishment of 7,500, and usually that establishment is in the order of about 6,800. But of that, the actual breakdown of police on patrol in a situation where the communities are under pressure with violence, only about 1,400 are on patrol. And if you go further, you may very well find that that patrol is large in the daytime, that 1,400. It may be less than 500 at night time, which is when the criminals are on the move. And then paragraph 9, I'll quote paragraph 9 for you. Given its public safety and national security duties, the reform of the Trinidad and Tobago Police Service has to be treated as an emergency situation through collective, non-partisan will for such to be effected in a sustainable manner. The degree of attention which the Trinidad and Tobago Police long required has not been forthcoming as it ought to be. Now, this is October 2017. A new government had come into office in September 2016. So this is 1 year after the government that I have led came into office. This is what we are dealing with. A conclusion by a team that started working in early 2017, reporting in October 2017, that the degree of attention which the Trinidad and Tobago Police Service long required has not been forthcoming as it ought to be. And they said this conclusion is derived from multidimensional data collected from stakeholders, civil society interviews, police officer surveys, focus groups, Trinidad and Tobago Police Service statistics on manpower and performance, and data collected from newspapers, and so on. All is not quite well with the Trinidad and Tobago Police Service. That's page 13. If I go to page 17, I'm still in the executive summary. Point 15. Officers were asked what level of confidence they thought the public had in the Trinidad and Tobago Police Service. 47% said very low. 35% said low. So that's 82% of the police officers think that the public has a very low view of and confidence in the police service. And 14% said no confidence at all. 82 plus 14 is how much? That is 96%. 96% of the police officers interviewed by this committee in 2017, just before October, 96% felt that the police service could not command the confidence of the population. And then, of course, point 19, despite the fact that all officers do not commit misconduct, there's a sufficient number of such persons in the police service to cause public alarm. And then it goes on to say, police misconduct and corruption seriously weaken and subvert the Trinidad and Tobago police manpower strength. Point 22 says 40% of all ranks and ages believe that the police service has very much corruption. Much or very much. Point 23, they notice that with respect to handling this very troubling situation, some officers have been on suspension for 7 11 or even 15 years. And they found that 307 officers were on suspension for misconduct out of a force of about just over 6,000. If I pick item 27, item 27. So recently, there's an obvious attempt to tackle delinquent and criminal conduct in the Trinidad and Tobago Police Service. However, while the decrease in offences in itself may be encouraging, given the need to build public confidence in the police and the behaviour standard expected of officers, the figures in 2015 are in themselves not satisfactory. Then item 34. The disciplinary system, after what I just mentioned there, there is a disciplinary system. The disciplinary system seems to be in utter disrepair, partly due to high level of bureaucracy involved. If we go to item 40. There's a recommendation, item 40, Roman 5, and it says, a strong and efficient oversight body and a stable, well-governed and high-performing police service should be top of the reform agenda. Now, recently, I thought that the time would have come for the government to have taken this recommendation frontally. And I was hoping that this would have been one of the things that we would have discussed had we met the opposition in any discussion as to what we may do or may not do, but that has not come to pass. But we had felt that this report could have formed a basis for some of those discussions, and this is one of the recommendations. And if you go down to Roman 8, this recommendation speaks about a police inspectorate. But none of that could happen without the parliamentarians, not people who meet outside and talk about how bad the crime is and who shoot who and how upset the families are. Parliamentarians, the 41 people who sit inside that house, have to interfere with the Constitution to create any such thing, because the police service is rooted in the Constitution. So any change that would be significant, as recommended here, about a police inspectorate to oversee police work and police job in securing the country, must of necessity involve special majority changes on the Constitution. So I'll leave that there for now. Just have to remind you that this document exists. And this document has guided the government along the way, starting from early in our tenure. 1 year after we were in office, this document was generated. Laid in the Parliament, Joint Select Committee, and one of the members there of this committee who generated this report ended up and is today the Commissioner of Police in Trinidad and Tobago. Now, let me speak here now as a Prime Minister who is in his 9th year running this country's affairs. This issue of the government and the use and expectation of the police to do its duty did not start as a problem for this government, not even the last one. It would have been a problem for quite some time. And that is why the governments were having difficulty finding individuals within the police service at the top who could easily and confidently move into the top positions and continue to carry on and sustain policing in the country. In fact, the opposite was the case. And that is why a government in 2010, 2015, that period, went outside of the police service of Trinidad and Tobago and hired a commissioner and a deputy commissioner from outside of the 7,000 people who we had in Trinidad and Tobago Police Service. Because we had come to the conclusion that these findings that are reported here in 2017 was the state of affairs in the police service. And therefore we had to look outside for leadership. And that was done. However, that did not work. Well within their contract term, Commissioner Gibbs and Commissioner Iwatsky were paid off millions to go back home because this thing ain't working. But for the benefit of those who keep giving us advice as to how easily it is to perfect the situation, you may recall that the government and the police service in this country, in response to murders, saw a state of emergency being declared in the absence and without the knowledge of the commissioner and deputy commissioner of police at that time. The commissioner of police was in Brazil, and the deputy didn't know that a state of emergency was being declared. That was how government and police operated in those days. But the issue of not finding appropriate leadership within the police service was and remains a problem to this day. And a lot of it has to do with the security that exists within the Constitution, because as well-meaning as it may be, the effect of it, you would have heard, I just quoted there, about the disrepair of the disciplinary system. And of course, the high level of corruption which pervades the entity that's supposed to secure us. None of this is news to anybody in Trinidad and Tobago. So when we keep looking for magic, it's not there. And when we start to be convenient with ourselves, we cannot run away from the history. Maybe others can, but the government can't. Because you see, after Gibbs and Iwatsky, what happened to this police service that I just described there in that summary from the audit committee in the most unflattering way? For 3 years, there was no commissioner of police substantively appointed. There was Commissioner Stephen Williams acting. And you recall how that went. Every 6 months, he went before a commission and he got an extension and an extension and an extension. 6 years. 6 years, worse than I thought. 6 years, this gentleman was there doing the job of commissioner of police, or attempting to do it, but not being able to be put as the substantive leader of a police service that was in such disarray as described by the Diosaran committee. In the meantime, the criminals getting better and better, more and more effective, brighter and brighter, better armed, better uniformed, better financed. That's what's going on. So just at the time when the criminals were beginning to get better in their business of criminality, the police service was in fact not at its best. And that is one of the problems that we have been trying to address all along. So, when the government changed in 2015, we met this situation. Mr. Williams was there in his 6th year, I think it was. But we decided to address this issue. As we got the committee to report, we also look at why is it that a commissioner of police not being appointed? You know what we discovered? There was no procedure to trigger the process of inviting applicants for the post, and there was a whole long rigmarole in law as to how you proceed, including some foreign university, and the long and short of that was that no steps could have been taken. When we try to examine why is this so, The short point we got from the lawyers is that in all that hullabaloo, there was no clear regulation as to who should trigger the process. So we went to the Parliament. One of the first things we did early, we went to the Parliament within 3 months of coming into office to change the regulation and to put in place the requisite legal trigger so that the Police Service Commission could begin the process to appoint a commissioner of police. We did that. We did that. Having done that, we had to go to court to defend that action because we were taken to court. So here it was, a person acting on 6-month chirrup. The government takes steps, uses majority, fix the law. We had to go to Parliament to defend every syllable in the court. We succeeded in doing that. And the process started then. That's how we started. Towards trying to get a commissioner of police subsequent to the Iwatsky-Gibbs period. Well, the Constitution says, not the Prime Minister, not the Cabinet, the Constitution puts in the hands of an independent Police Service Commission the power to interview people, to select people, and to recommend them to the Parliament in a particular way. So it doesn't matter how much you want the Prime Minister to do or say and how fast you want him to go, that is not within the remit of the Prime Minister. That is in the hands of the Independent Police Service Commission. And let me say this, sir. That Police Service Commission is appointed by the President in his or her own capacity, required to simply consult with the leader of the opposition and the Prime Minister. Consult means I tell about it, and you get your view, and I proceed. I saw the opposition this week, once again, trying to misrepresent, pretending to know something, that the current Police Service Commission is somehow the plaything of the Prime Minister, because they find connections between the Prime Minister and members of the Commission, and they want investigation of the Commission and whatnot. I want to say to the country here, no. I don't know anybody on the Police Service Commission. None. They're all appointed by the President, and when the President consulted me, I would have looked at the names, some of the names I know, I would have consulted here and there, and I have no reason to object. I gave my no objection. Not one of them is a person who I have had any socializing with or any contact with in any way. I don't know them. So any statement to the contrary is not true, it's simply mischievous. The Police Service Commission is appointed by the President, and the President does so in her own right. Her meaning, we had a lady last time, we have a lady now. And if it was a man, it would have been him. That is a fact. So here it is. We did get to the point where the Commission could have initiated the process of getting a commissioner. That process, we rely on the Commission to do the interviews, the investigation, the polygraph, the checking of CVs and so on. That's what the Commission is there for. Independent of the Cabinet, independent of the government. And then the Commission, having done its work, sends its findings and its recommendations to the President, who transmits it to the Parliament. You would have heard a lot of people talking about meritless and meritless and meritless. I could tell you one thing. I've been in Prime Minister of this country for this 8.5 years. I have never seen a meritless. Never seen one. What I do see is the Commission sent to the Parliament from time to time, as exists today, Right, as I speak to you now, there are 3 names, notification in the Parliament, 3 names of 3 officers for the Parliament to consider on the recommendation of the Commission for Deputy Commissioner. And I think a 4th name came in yesterday for acting, because we have not concluded the work on the 3 who are there and taking a position on them. There was a requirement for an acting position, and a 4th name has come now for acting. That is what the law requires. That's what the Constitution requires. And the Prime Minister and the Cabinet and other persons in the country have no say in it. The law lays down the pathway. So anything else you're hearing is just so much old talk. I know we are all upset by the criminality. I know we would love to have a change for the better overnight, but we cannot disregard what is in the law and what is within the perimeter and responsibility and remit of the Prime Minister. Like I saw this morning, I saw somebody saying the press conference might be for the Prime Minister to fire the Commissioner of Police. Well, to the extent that the Commissioner of Police is on a contract, right, in the Ministry of National Security, that is, it may allow for certain actions to be taken. But you don't take actions capriciously. As a matter of fact, the Commission here, there was something in the, I did see when I studied this thing recently. It says, yeah, page 25, and I just made that comment. Page 25, Roman 4. Listen to what the Audit Committee said in 2017. In such circumstances, nothing short of a well-crafted and resource-supported 5 to 7 year reconstruction policy and well-targeted plan will suffice to have required improvement in this very troubling crime and violence problem. Crime and violence problem. Experience, and I'm quoting still, experience has repeatedly shown that hasty overnight solutions do not work. And it goes on to say that quick decisions to hire 1,000 more police officers some 10 years ago did not produce the results expected, and it must have merely just taken the existing problems. In the light of these circumstances, manpower should not be hastily added without appropriate analysis. That was the comment of the Audit Committee then. But let me get back to part 3. So we got to the point of people applying for the job of Commissioner of Police. Many of them senior police officers. A whole gap. It's interesting for you to know, members of the media and the public, that these gap of people, mainly from the police service, they have to go through a screening process laid out by the Police Service Commission, not by the Cabinet, not by the Prime Minister, not by the government. The Police Service Commission lays out a pathway that they must pass through. One of those sieves in that screen is a polygraph test. And you all know what polygraphs are. To determine if they are truthful, have integrity, if they are deceitful, and if they're hiding something that is dangerous. The first time we got that process going, and there were applicants for this job, if my memory serves me right, only 3 of those aspirants passed the polygraph test. 2 women and 1 man. I think that was it. Or the second time. But that was the outcome of the polygraph test. So here you had this batch of people wanting the job of Commissioner of Police. Only 3 of them could have passed a polygraph test. Anyway, now that puts the government in a bind. Because when the Commission makes its recommendation to the Cabinet, if the use of a polygraph test is important, how much importance do you apply to it? It's a question for the majority in the Parliament. The minority could say anything because they are not responsible for anything. But the majority in the Parliament have a bind. Suppose the commission recommends somebody to you for the position, but the person failed the polygraph test. What do? And suppose the recommendation comes to the parliament, and members of the parliament, members of the government, obtain information which is inimical to a good outcome to that recommendation. What do? Because remember, the government is not involved, the parliament is not involved in the selection process or the evaluation process. A recommendation comes to the parliament, and it is left to the parliament to decide whether you support the recommendation or not. In that situation, what has been our experience? Names come from the Independent Police Service Commission. Okay, these are the names that are short in front of us, so you start looking at them. Up comes information that says, we can't support this for this reason. Okay, next one. We can't support this for this reason. And then we got, in one situation, we got down to number 4. You hear a lot about who was top of the list and who was who was top of the egg. We got down to the 4th candidate. In fact, was the last candidate in that batch of recommendations. Because the other 3, we could not support based on information of one kind or another. And I'm not here setting out to cast aspersions on people. I'm just saying these were the facts of the situation. But I did say a little while ago that governments were having difficulty finding leadership from the police within the police service. So on this occasion, when there was one name left on the list in the parliament, the government decided that we would take the chance of accepting the recommendation of the Police Service Commission on this character who was not a police officer. Unlike the previous government that brought the Canadians in from the outside, we brought a non-police officer from the outside, but somebody who had an exposure to government, to the defense force and so on, and we made that person commissioner of police. That was the rationale. And that would have been in 2018, right? So if you follow what I'm saying, from the state of the police in 2015, reported on in 2016, 2017, and then attentions of that happened, and here we are in 2018 now, taking the chance to appoint, and we appointed a commissioner for 3 years. And at the end of that 3-year period, that contract was ended, and the association ended. So now, the commission, the Police Service Commission, once a vacancy exists for commissioner or deputy commissioners, I think there are four deputies. Once a vacancy exists there, the process that we had managed to put in place kicks in, and the commission will do the work of treating with aspirants and applicants and make recommendation to the parliament. I could tell you now, this whole inconvenience of the parliament having to approve an acting commissioner if the commissioner goes out of the country, the Attorney General is currently instructed and is underway in the next few weeks or days, as the case might be. We're going to come to the parliament and we are going to change that regulation to prevent the parliament, or we'll try to prevent the parliament from having to approve an acting for a day or 2 or for whatever period, right? That requires a special majority. The Attorney General will draft a requisite amendment and we'll bring it to the parliament, and we hope that responsible parliamentarians among the 41 who are in there will give the requisite majority so that that could be done, so you don't have to bring to parliament every time you need to put somebody to act. You have 4 deputies. And if one has to go to act, you have to come to the parliament. That is not management. That is just the bureaucratic obfuscation that the committee talk about here. So that's one thing that's coming. And of course, we have the 3 deputies before us. Immediately after Carnival, we will take a decision, because the government has been looking at the situation there, We will take a decision on those three, and we will put it to the floor in the Parliament. But it is the Parliament that makes the final say, you know. You would have seen our colleagues who now somehow would like to resile from their vote. Because when the current commissioner, when her name came, and incidentally, I think she was one of the few who had passed the polygraph test. When her name came up in the Parliament, recommended by the Police Service Commission, she got the support of all 41 members of Parliament. We were all taking a chance on the recommendation of the Police Service Commission. So if today the government's position is that once the person is in the post, they can count on the full support of the government. Once you are in the post, there's no point in appointing a general to go to war for you and start undermining them the day after or whatever, right? We have taken the position that while you are in post, carrying out the duty, while you're there, you can count on the full support of the government until that has changed. Because it makes no sense to put somebody there and then turn around and destroy the morale and undermine them. If it is that the person has to be removed at the end of an assessment, fine, or if they do something really outrageous, and so. But in terms of support, right? Not only the government, but the population needs to support the police service. This is a troubled police service. And by support, I don't mean support wrongdoing, eh? I mean support the vast majority of right-thinking police officers who put in their lives on the line to defend us. We must support them. And by the same token, we must eradicate the others who are unsuitable. And that is why the current arrangements, while we took note of the comment in the audit report that putting in 1,000 officers, many of them were SRPs of dubious quality. When we started, we are making a deliberate attempt for proper screening and selecting people of a higher quality and greater commitment going into the police academy at this point in time, right? And in terms of the last policy the government did about putting 1,000 officers in the local government body, right? And adding more under the commissioner of police, it is because the operations of the law with our police services limit us to a certain amount of patrolling. There's a requirement for our communities to be more heavily patrolled because the criminality is literally walking the street night and day. And if you only have a minimum amount of police officers available to you at night, you definitely need more out there. And by the time you take out who on sick leave, who on vacation leave, who on this leave, who in the courthouse, you get a very limited amount of patrolling at a time when criminals are all over the country requiring supervision by an effective police service. So that's how we're going about it. Putting a higher quality of recruiting, giving them better training. As a matter of fact, the 1,000 officers that went into local government, we took a year and a half, almost 2 years, to get 800 of them in there because they had to go through proper specific training to be of a higher quality when they come out. We didn't just pick up people and say, okay, you're an SRP and put you in the police service. Right? So in that way, it took us a longer time to get the 1,000 officers spread out in local government because we took note of what was said here in this audit report. And we're doing better at the academy right now. A higher quality of officers going in. So there's one other thing I want to mention. And that is, we have a lot of conversation in this country about the parliament being involved in this. I think my colleagues will tell you, before I was prime minister, so I couldn't be speaking for prime ministerial power. My position was that the removal of that veto from the office of the prime minister was only going to create confusion. My colleagues will tell you that. That's my position. It did not remove the authority of the prime minister to influence the appointment of a commissioner of police. All it did was get the parliament involved, and all it did was bring confusion in the process. Before that, commissioners were appointed in a smooth public service way, and all the prime minister was required to do, if he had a problem with a nominee, was to say no to that nominee, and then the commission had to go to the next nominee in line. That was all the Prime Minister had to do. The Prime Minister couldn't go and tell the Commissioner of Police what to do in policing and so on, as they tried to make out. The only power the Prime Minister has was one that he could have said if he had, and you must remember the Prime Minister also carries a line of information called the National Security Council. And if for good reason the Prime Minister thought that the Commission had made a recommendation, which the Prime Minister at the time did not think was in the best interest of the public, the Prime Minister could have said no, and the Commission was then duty-bound to go to the next person, and then we get smooth appointment. So all kind of people, Captain Bloom was appointed, Eustace Bernard, what's his name? Number of commissioners of police appointed as public service head, because the police commissioner is really a public service position, a kind of public servant appointed by an independent commission. When it comes to the Parliament now, it still remains that it is the majority that will go, because the majority decision. So here it is just saying, okay, take away the power from the Prime Minister and the Prime Minister's office, but you give it to him in the Parliament where he controls the majority. What have you done? And out of that came this whole thing with the Williams era, where 6 years you couldn't appoint a commissioner of police. In the meantime, the police service going to hell in a handbasket. And that is what we have been dealing with. And then when that has become the reality, very few people want to confront that reality. The easiest reality is blame the Prime Minister, blame the Minister, blame the Prime Minister, blame the Minister. But look at what we are dealing with. And the only people who could rectify this are the 41 members of Parliament. And members of Parliament are required to function in the Parliament. I could fill up 44 maxis and go from here to Tunapuna and talk about crime and have a nice night, and I'm this big star and all my friends, and tell them, don't wear no red jersey, just come in different colors and look like the country. And that you could do that. But the bottom line is you haven't touched, and you're not prepared to touch the porcupine, which is there are constitutional things here if you want change. And the place where parliamentarians get together is in the Parliament. I mentioned a while ago to you that this report went to the Joint Select Committee of the Parliament. May I ask you a question now? What did they do with it? Why don't they even mention anything from it? I'm sure most of them didn't read it. But pretending now that they have some answer in their pocket. This is a document that's extremely valuable. And the government put its trust in this document, in the people that did this analysis. And that's why the cabinet was able to stand firm, because we stood firm in trying to improve the police service, the SSA, the Defense Force, the Coast Guard, the Fire Service. These are the security agencies, and we have directed significant resources in capital, in human capital, in training, in equipment, in diplomacy, to make sure that this description that Professor Diosaran and his team described in 2017, we set about to change that. And I could tell you, the minister and other people who are around these systems, you all are in the media. Grill them, let them tell you the details of this and what is happening and what is not happening. And you'll get a much better idea of where we are with safety and security in Trinidad and Tobago. Not just talking without facts and talking with agendas that are not even hidden. These are the facts. These are the facts. This is the reality. This is the situation. As Prime Minister, I've appointed 3 Ministers of National Security over different times. I had Minister Dillon first, then there was Minister Young, now there's Minister Hines. And maybe tomorrow it might be you, prior. But the bottom line is, it's not a plaything, right? This is a serious matter. And we sit and discuss these issues and take decisions and allocate resources. The allocation of resources in the last 5 years, even in the face of a pandemic, right, Wasn't easy. But I can tell you one thing. During the pandemic, the police service performed admirably. It's not a lost cause. But we keep trying to improve it on an ongoing basis. Right? And there are other things that can be done, and we'll keep trying to do those things, not the least of which is getting support in the parliament, because that is where significant changes can be made. No change can be made outside of the parliament that's going to be significant with respect to this whole issue of the contents of this report and the work of the government in dealing with attempting to improve the police service. A simple thing like discipline. Police officer doing something quite ridiculous and it's spelled out in the law. They could only be fined, 3 days pay or some nonsense like that from old British Army rules. Right? And of course, discipline is completely outside of the government's remit. The government has the same way the government has absolutely no say or no involvement in who the police puts hand on or shows interest in. The government and its members have no responsibility or any authority to deal with disciplining even the most junior of police officer who behave in the most horrible way. All of that is outside of and been put outside in the constitution, outside of the government. So a lot of what you hold in the government responsible for. And I tell you something, I wouldn't be surprised to hear that after I've said all of this, that somebody say, oh, you're only making excuses. I have no excuse to make. None. I can stand any consequence that this government has been responsible for and you want to hold us responsible for. But don't hold us responsible where we have no authority. Other people have authority. The revolving door that takes place in the courthouse. Right? The government has no say in that. You or the media, you'll be the first to scream if you see the government even put a fingernail near the courthouse door to interfere with anything inside there. Because you demand that separation of authority and power. You demand it. Only recently, when something happened, and the National Security Council was very alarmed, and the government mentioned that, look, we will have to ask the commissioner to look at this whole question of the utilization of police time. Yeah? Immediately the Prime Minister was accused of interfering with the police service and being a dictator. So in one breath, you must ask the Commissioner of Police about the utilization of the manpower resources, where it is clear police officers have been mainly in conflict in some areas. But of course, something else. Easy to hold the government responsible. Well, we are all responsible. The government is responsible. But the authority to do certain things doesn't lie within the government. It does lie in the government in many things. But there are areas which the government can't get into. And one of those areas is the police operations. So I would like you all to understand that. And this document should tell you that we are not a government that came in here willy-nilly to hide behind excuses. This document is probably one of the most fundamental documents prepared by this government in the early part of our existence. There was a period when, before we started out making decisions and taking action, we had a lot of consultation, and then we were being accused of being a government by consultation. This is one of the early ones. Right? And of course, we, as a government, will be guided by these things. But how is the population guided? A lot of it by emotion, and a lot of it by hidden agendas. I am not here to tell you about, to crow about a 1% increase or 1% decline. But as a trained scientist, I believe in facts and statistics. I saw a report in one of the papers yesterday about how we performed in policing at different times under different commissioners. And I just want, there's something called the Department of Crime and Problems Analysis in the Police Service, CAPA. That is where you go to get information on the performance of the police. They track all the data every year. And it's important that we look at the facts. The facts. Every year, commissioners, in response to this violent crime and other crimes, set targets. And I did see some of that, I think, in the newspaper there. Well, let us spend a moment going through the targets, because if the number is unpleasant, it's accepted as your responsibility. If it is pleasant, well, then it's happenstance. Can't be that. If you're dealing with statistics, you're dealing with statistics, right? So, in 2018, the target for decrease in murders, and I'm quoting here from the CAPA report. This is not the government or the Prime Minister's office. This is the CAPA report, right? Crime and Problems Analysis of the Police Performance. 2018, of course, top of the list was decrease in murders, because it is murders that is traumatizing the country in particular. So the decrease in murders is the target. And everybody knows that, you can't just go and flick a switch and bring it down as not one bullet carries it up. Target, 2018, 5% reduction was the target. What was achieved? 4.4% increase. So, you set out to say we could bring it down by 5%. In fact, it went up by 4.4%. That was 2018. But of course, the target is simply an expectation. You have nobody sees around the corner into the future and so on. You set a target. 2019, the target was set at 10% reduction. In fact, it increased by 4.5%. 2020, this is COVID, just bear that in mind. 2020 was COVID. The target was 10% decrease in murders. We had a 26% decrease. And I dare say that dramatic decrease was largely as a result of the population and the lockdowns in COVID. 2021, again, the target is now 5% decrease in murders. 2021, there was a 12.5% increase. 2022, there was a target set. This is a different commissioner is now in office. This is now acting Commissioner Jacob, because he came in after the 3-year of Commissioner Griffith, which went from 2018 to 2021, 3 years, right? We are now into the Jacob period. 5% decrease was set as the target. There was a 34% increase. And Jacob went, and Miss Christopher came in. She set a 20% decrease as her target and achieved a 4.8% decrease. Now, those are the facts, those are the figures. And they don't say anything about who should stay and whose contract should be renewed and so on and so on. Those are decisions that will be taken in a more sober and expanded analysis. And ladies and gentlemen, this government will continue to treat this matter very seriously. The final point I want to make, again for the record, we function in all the committees inside the Parliament as and when required. In fact, some of those committees, we initiate them. We put information inside the Parliament to facilitate bills being progressed and laws being enacted. Much of what has to do with crime and criminality requires special majorities. And that is something that members of Parliament have been guarding their vote very zealously and not giving as liberally as they could have. That is inside the Parliament. That's where the work is done. But when it was said that maybe an informal conversation outside among parliamentary colleagues could help to bring about what I thought was a loosening of the strictures in the parliament. Because in the end, it's going to be in the parliament. That's where parliamentarians work. That's where the laws are made. I immediately, as Prime Minister, agreed to participate in such a process and indicated how I thought the process could go. And that indication was made available to my colleagues. And I went further. I did two things as leader of the government team. I appointed a team with responsibility to meet the other team. And I also sent in writing a list of the legislation that we thought had sticking points. The other side sent a 6-page of what they thought were the issues, including things like changing the ministry into 3 and various things like that, and making guns more easily available, and standing ground. So both sides indicated, and we said, well, okay, we'll bring everything and others to this discussion. The fact is that the government has been willing. The government appointed its team and appointed a convener to bring the two teams together. Because you can't have meetings if nobody's going to call the meeting, nobody's going to convene the meeting, somebody has to chair the meeting and so on. That's how meetings are done. And if parliamentarians have to meet, that's how it's done. To date, we have not had a response to that from our colleagues. So I find it quite disingenuous for all these advisors in the country to forever be advising that the two teams should meet and the two parties are ridiculous. It's not 2 parties. The PNM is 1 party. We are a movement, one organization. What we ought to have done, we have done. And if you have difficulty talking to other people, then say so. But stop bringing us into other people's behavior. If our other colleagues choose not to take part in a process that is civil and as understanding as that, what you calling our name for? And it is so important that if the Prime Minister is not there, right, to please somebody, nothing will happen. And I'm pointing out to you all, this is not the first time that our parliamentary colleagues have done that. They did the same thing with the Welsh report in healthcare delivery. So you in the media who are always writing about the two teams and the two parties irresponsible and whatever, if you have nothing to write, just leave a blank page. So if you have any questions on this matter of national security and all the breadth I've mentioned here now, I'll take them now, and I hope I'll be able to answer some of them for you. Yes, you are.
Okay, and what is the problem?
I had his hand up for a long time. Excuse me.
If, as you say, many of the measures required to bring about an amelioration of the crime situation can only come about if there is cooperation in Parliament, why then are you so adamant that you should not be part of the crime talks? Especially since, a previous PNM Prime Minister was part of crime talks, and that brought about change to the Constitution and reform, well, at least a reform bill of the police service. And I ask the question because the opposition originally took the position that they wanted Gary Griffith to be part, and they wanted people external to the Parliament to be part of the team. When the government said it wasn't prepared to have non-parliamentarians as part of the arrangement because the issues had to be dealt with in the Parliament, they gave in and they pulled back Gary Griffith's name. So there was a compromise on their part.
I don't know that what you're saying is correct. Nobody has ever said to me, the opposition has never said to me what their team is. So I don't know of any Gary Griffith in the opposition team. They have never named a team. Right? So I don't know. I have never seen the names of people who were going to be the opposition team.
You did that in a press conference.
I did that in the context of my role as Prime Minister and my treatment with an individual who, as far as I am concerned, I am not prepared to sit with and talk about crime. And listen, I'm doing that out of a sense of duty. That has nothing to do with the opposition coming to me. If the opposition would say that they want to bring somebody who I am saying as Prime Minister, head of the National Security Council, that such a person has no place in any discussion that I am part of or my government is a part of, well, then that's how it is. Right? And then secondly, let us stay with the point. The government said, let us have 2 teams. The government named a government team. We have not seen an opposition team. And I'm not playing names here and talking about Mr. Griffith or Miss Griffith. No, that is not part of it. That's a completely separate matter. I have not seen a government team, an opposition team. And we are quite happy and ready to sit with the opposition. And if I'm the head of the government, my understanding of governance and civil work, you don't go out there and try to be the prime minister of the team and the group. We are doing lots of things where the prime minister is not involved, personally, but the government is involved.
If you want a chance.
Let me tell you something. You really feel I don't want an outcome? You think that the opposition that obstruct every single thing we bring to the parliament are not happy with a stump speech that crime took over the country? Yeah, who are you talking to?
But if you are prepared to do whatever is necessary, why give the impression that you have taken a position, you're not moving from that position, and that your belief is that they already want to solve crime, so you're not going to make any additional concession to them because you know that's not what.
I don't know that I have to make any concession to them. Those are. To get the 2 sides to speak. I'm not talking about being a supplicant for the opposition or dancing. Did you see a 6-page letter sent to me by the opposition leader? What did I do with that letter? I didn't make an issue of it. The government had a group of issues. They sent a group of issues. And the government team and the opposition team would meet over those issues and any other issues that come in there. That is as far as I agreed to do. I didn't agree to try to appease any person. I have a country to run, I have a government to run, I have a cabinet to run, and I took the responsible decision of putting 4 members of the cabinet as the government's team. So if the opposition does not name a team, it tells me they're not interested. And they're working you all in the media, crime talk. Anybody could get a group to go out and talk about crime, But how come, where it is possible to do specifics, where you have the authority to act, how come it is always no? How come? What?
What is the problem with you just attending the talk?
I have a job to do, and I'm doing my job in the way that the Constitution requires me to do it. To not what?
To not try to make the 2 sides come together.
Have talks with whom? I must say, I don't agree. I didn't agree that this kind of conversation is one for the wider national community where NGOs and labor and credit unions are going to be involved. I didn't think that was something the government wanted to participate in. And that doesn't prevent them from meeting. National groups are meeting and talking about crime, and that is all fine. But why aren't the parliamentarians prepared to do their job as parliamentarians?
But do you understand?
I could only relate to the opposition as parliamentarians. I'm not prepared to relate to them as anything else. Parliamentarians. And if it is a difficulty for the media to talk to them as parliamentarians, that is your difficulty, not mine.
Do you understand that your determination not to be part of the team is what allows people to say both sides and both sides?
I'm saying that it is a free country. People can say that. I am expressing what I understand to be the facts and the government's position. So if after I've done that, people say this or people say that, I don't have any control over that. I'll tell you one thing. I'm always in front of the media here. I'm always in front of the country. And everything I've told you is what I know to be the truth and the fact. And that is what I know I can do as Prime Minister. And if we have a country where parliamentarians are not prepared to function inside of the parliament, and somehow some talks outside is what's going to make it done, I don't want to be any part of that.
It was done in the past. The talks that
I am not in the past. It is the past that got, I just told you the calamity that they created by removing the Public Service Prime Minister's veto. That is what created this calamity, in case you all don't want to accept that. Before Mr. Manning gave up the prime ministerial veto and changed the law, they agreed to change the law to create that trouble, though, right? And look at what the outcome is. When I got in there as prime minister in 2015, you couldn't even start a process. Years of vacancy going on. It was the government that I led that brought the process where the Police Service Commission could even invite applications for the post. So don't tell me about the past. We have made a mess of it. And those who believe that the parliamentarians function better outside of the parliament, well then I don't agree with that. Parliamentarians have to function in the parliament. And if you don't want to use your vote to fight crime in the parliament, I don't think you can use anything outside of the parliament to fight crime, because you want crime as a political tool for stump speeches and to hold a head and ball how bad crime is in the country. That's what you want to do. And you are parliamentarians elected by people to represent them in the parliament. You don't want to use your vote to do anything in the parliament which you believe will help the government. It's not the government you're helping, it's the country. And I stand on that position. Anybody who wanted to help the country, when those matters come to the parliament, you remember the anti-gang law? They voted it down in the parliament. And it was when there was a public outcry, run back to the parliament and say, okay, let's waive the standing order and bring it back and we'll vote for it. And you're all afraid to tell them about how they behave with the vote that they have been given in parts of this country. And pretending as though some crime talks between me and them outside the parliament is what is required to fight crime. No. What is required to fight crime is to deal with what is in this report. And the government has a responsibility. Opposition could say what they want because they're not accountable to anybody, not even their constituents. So stop making excuses for them. I am waiting to see a team from the opposition. The government is willing and able to sit with them. No team has been appointed. I even saw an editorial which was said both parties have appointed teams. I have to correct that on this podium. There's one team appointed, the PNM team. And if the opposition genuinely wants to help the country's situation, and they don't, because they don't want to give up the continuous rah-rah. You think they want to see crime go down to lose their election campaign? So let us not twist the facts.
Is it time, Dr. Rowley, sorry about that. Is it time for Parliament to have a crime debate? Well, firstly on the specifics of policing structure, and then a broader...
Many debates on crime.
But they tend to be very just like no confidence motions and a lot of slanging off.
No. I have not. I've been Prime Minister of this country for 9 years, 8.5 years. There's never been a no confidence motion in me.
No, not you.
Right? Or the government.
Well, our Honourable Minister.
Me or the government? No, you just mentioned no confidence. As
the Honourable Minister, there have been, they tend to degrade.
Yeah, because you see, it is being reduced to personalities. I try to stay away from the personality and deal with the facts and the institution. Right? The legislation does not identify personality. It's called ad hominem if you do that. Right? And a lot of the attacks on the minister and the government is personalized. As though there's some magic if this person is there. I've had recommendations from my parliamentary colleagues that the Prime Minister should take over the portfolio of the national security. As if that somehow will make it different. And to take your point, that in the past that happened, a Prime Minister did that. And very hurriedly gave it back to the minister or some other minister, because as Prime Minister, you can't stand in for other ministers because things aren't going well in one portfolio. There are 20-odd portfolios. The Prime Minister oversees all of them and responsible for all of them.
Maybe a fresh face might bring fresh insights to the portfolio.
Of course. And it can also take away from the experience that is being put to bear. And it also might interfere with, there's a learning curve. And I guarantee you, if I give you that portfolio tomorrow, the attack on you will be no different to the one on Mr. Hines. Because the whole idea is to attack the person and disregard the work that is being done. Right? You think the opposition has anything good to say about me? Have you ever seen it? Come on, real. Let's be real. Have you ever seen anything good about me being said by the opposition? Well, as I'm telling you. So when you reduce it only to personalities, you lose sight of the facts of the situation, the job to be done, and the institutions to be strengthened.
The reason I said it is because there is a sense of hopelessness in the country that the situation will not improve.
I tell you, I represent the PNM. I lead a PNM government, and that sense of hopelessness is not what we engender, is not what we believe, because as difficult as it is, we believe it's never hopeless.
The country is feeling a sense of hopelessness, and it exists, I think, at the levels of leadership in terms of the crime.
Well, what you're saying there is that, well, you know, this hopelessness that you're talking about, if these obstructionists talk to me outside the parliament, that will go. That's what you're saying?
No, that's not set in the context of maybe looking at changing around some of at the level of the cabinet, making changes.
I know the press is always advising on cabinet changes and always looking forward to cabinet reshuffle. Sometimes I myself am the last person to hear there's going to be a reshuffle. That's par for the course, right? But a cabinet is a team. People go in portfolios, they do work, and for whatever reason, some might be there for a long time, some might be there for a short time. That responsibility lies with an assessment by the Prime Minister. That's not going to change. Yes,
Good morning, Prime Minister. Are you saying that because you cannot get the support of the UNC, nor a special majority in Parliament, that it cannot implement any recommendations of the Bipartisan Committee?
No. I have not said that at all. I have said that if there are changes to be made that will be substantial, that will interfere with the Constitution, within which there are certain constraints, and I said that in the context of where it is said that the government should do this and the Prime Minister should do that. There are constraints with respect to authority. And if you want to put things in place to allow certain things to happen, among some of the things that you see being mentioned, they require such substantial changes which will impact on the Constitution that will require a special majority.
The Bipartisan report was laid in Parliament in 2017, right? That's 7 years ago. Has any of recommendations been implemented?
While I was talking, I told them a number of things that were done, not the least of which is trying to strengthen the police service. When the new commissioner of police came in 2018, this was given to him. I just mentioned to you the current commissioner of police is the author of this document, right? And of course, in managing the police academy and the intake into the police service and many other things, you will see. And I also did mention to you one thing there, which is a fundamental point of reform of the Constitution on that subject, of a police inspectorate, because of the issues that have emerged and remain with us. And that certainly will require a special majority, if that is deemed to be something that ought to replace what exists now.
You said the police commissioner has a contract with the Ministry of National Security. Can you say how long that contract is? Because we know that is renewed every year.
The current contract ends in May. The police commissioner was extended for 1 year. As you know, she's a retiree, and she was given 1 year, and then with the extension, the government had the option to have done 3 years, and we did 1 year. And we expect that during that period of time that we would get to a different place.
Good morning.
So in May,
Meaning what?
so you all have decided what will happen in May?
No, we have not yet decided that.
But you don't think that given the time it takes to select a police commissioner, that you can't wait until May to make a decision?
Well, you see, your assumptions are not correct. Your assumptions are not correct, right? The government expects that the Police Service Commission will we've had some kind of conversation, and the Police Service Commission would act at the appropriate time.
So you think there'll be a new police commissioner soon, Prime Minister?
No, I'm not saying that. I don't want you to put any word in my mouth.
Yes.
The court ruled that was wrong. Okay, so who triggers the police service?
The Police Service Commission, a vacancy has to be, right? And even if anything to be done, the Police Service Commission, we've put all that authority there. And it is the Police Service Commission that would trigger the process, invite applications, assess them, and when a vacancy arises, put that to the Parliament. So that process is what's there in front of us now. It has been an uphill battle, eh?
Morning, Mr. Prime Minister. You would have referred to some statistics from various police commissioners over the past few years, particularly in terms of the current...
From the analysis section of the police service.
Yeah, you referred to it. And based on that, and based on the recent appearance of Mrs. Ula Harewood Christopher before a parliamentary joint select committee last week, would just like to know from your role and as a citizen, are you pleased with the performance of the current commissioner based on what you've seen?
I am not here publicly assessing the Commissioner of Police. I will not do that. And as I said earlier, as long as the commissioner is in post as commissioner for whatever period of time, the commissioner must have the support of the government, whether it's for another day, another month, another year. Right? So I'm not going to get into whether I'm pleased with her appearance in front of the media and whatever. And so that's not the role of the Prime Minister.
A suggestion was recently made, and I think you referred to the independence of the Police Service Commission in terms of vetting and being part, a major stakeholder in the selection process. But a suggestion was recently made that the PSC, as a body...
They're not a major stakeholder. They are the singular authority.
Thank you for the correction. That the PSC, it was suggested, should be brought before a joint select committee to answer and to account for the mechanisms behind the selection process. Do you agree with that?
I'm not, from where I operate, I'm not going to be publicly taking those positions, but that would be a position, the chairman of the Committee of Parliament, if the chairman believes that that would be helpful. I don't know that that is something that is, because one of the things that we have in our constitution, we do have some separation in place, but we also have people with responsibility or with authority reporting to nobody. I don't know if you remember the early days of Ramesh Maharaj when he started making us the laws. One of the things he was getting at was that there are all these people who have authority, but they're not accountable. So if it can be found that the Parliament wants to speak to that commission or any commission for that matter, I don't know that should be too far, a bridge too far.
Are you concerned about the service commissions? The whole process there, how they operate?
It is because I am concerned that I have led the government to put in place this conversation that is they're now getting off the ground, to look at the whole question of the Constitution and those commissions and similar aspects of our Constitution. So I won't say more than that at this time.
Prime Minister, good morning. Just wondering, a couple of points of clarification, if you don't mind. You had spoken about the process inherited from the administration led by the late Mr. Manning in terms of the veto power and the government's majority, and etc. in terms of appointing a police commissioner after the PSC's recommendation.
I didn't inherit anything. I had a job to do, and I mentioned the situation that the job had to deal with. So it's not an inheritance. My inheritance is Mason Hall.
Well, just in terms of the process, has your administration looked at examining whether this process should be changed, whether to revert back to the previous position of veto power of a Prime Minister without parliamentary intervention, or a new process altogether?
Not really, but some aspects of it we realize are inimical to good order and not modern management friendly. But any change would require a level of cooperation in the parliament which has been completely absent. So we didn't spend our time trying to hammer that down. We did a lot of work where the government's majority could have worked, and if at some time later on, maybe coming out of the Constitution Commission advisory, if out of that work comes agreement or an indication that certain aspects of our Constitution should be tampered with, then that's where the Parliament and the parliamentarians and the general electorate will come into being.
I'm just wondering, if you have a situation as presently exists where there's a nomination, it's debated in Parliament, but the actual nominee doesn't have an opportunity to present his or herself to answer questions from members and so on. Is that something that also could be looked at if you're looking at changes at all?
That is, again, another idea, but you must remember what has happened there. We changed the law. I thought it had something to do with trying to mirror the situation in the United States where the Parliament appoints people after assessing them. But that point you just made there is completely absent in our system. And it, in fact, creates certain kinds of problems because you're acting in a void. And in many instances, people can feel that they have not been fairly treated because information upon which action is going to be taken was not before them for their response or any representative. So it's a bit of a halfway house that didn't solve a problem, it created new ones.
You had mentioned in terms of the police inspectorate recommendation. Has your administration begun the process of looking at possible legislation? Yes, you said it's a special majority requirement.
Legislation comes after you have come to a position of policy and the policy is accepted as the next step. And only then, so legislation doesn't just appear, right? That's the last post. You know, discussion, acknowledgement, consideration, a choice of pathway, and then what is the policy? And then after the policy, then you begin to talk about how it can be expressed legislatively. So we are a long way from that. But yes, the conversation of what is not working and what may need to be addressed, yes, we have been looking at that.
Prime Minister.
Prime Minister, just...
Wait, one at a time. You have... Jesse?
Yes, sir, just a very quick question. Jesse, CNC3 News, Prime Minister. To those looking on, Prime Minister, looking on at this press conference, you would have mentioned your support to Mrs. Howard Christopher and alluded to changes that are necessary for the police service as recommended in the manpower audit report. But there are those who are concerned about what's next for crime and the immediate steps. You would have traveled, you would have led a delegation to Washington, met with the FBI, met with the CIA. You alluded to internal issues that you are concerned about here at home. What can the population expect, Prime Minister, as it pertains to handling crime forthwith?
Well, I don't want you to misunderstand what I said. I'm not here saying that I'm supporting underperformance or I'm supporting incompetence or any such thing. Because of where I operate from as Prime Minister, head of the cabinet, head of the government, how would you take it if I come out here and start bad-mouthing the sergeant in the Carnage police station or the director of customs or the commissioner of police? How would you take that? I'm sure you wouldn't take it very well. You would say that is not for me to do in a public place. So, and then I go further and I say, when these officers are in position, until such time as there is you come to the point where certain action has to be taken, you ought to support them to try to get the job done that they have been put there to do. Understand what I'm saying? So you will not find me coming here and saying, well, okay, I'm happy with the Commissioner of Police, so therefore done to be said. Or I'm not happy with her and therefore she's going to go tomorrow. Those things, if they have to emerge, they must emerge in a particular way, right? And not by public commentary to give the impression that, that the Prime Minister, because the headline can't be that the Prime Minister is upset with the Commissioner of Police because she misspoke at a press conference, something like that. That is not what I'm going to be doing, okay? And with respect to other matters as to what assistance we may get from the United States using their agencies, the answer is a lot of help. We are, in fact, the Trinidad and Tobago Security Services are partnered with the Delaware Police Service, right? And they were in the discussions with us when we were in Washington, because there are a lot of things that we need to have done which we can't do for ourselves, largely because a lot of the problems that we face come to us from outside, right? And something like sharing information, a simple thing like sharing information or training personnel, right? That is very valuable. And the United States sometimes funds some of those things for us. Getting equipment, right? We currently, we have some equipment here in our security systems which need change out. I mean, our two C-26 planes, they're 30-odd years old. And I mean, they need to be changed. They're not cheap, right? So if we can find ways of getting assistance to get them changed, right? Either by help to buy new ones, any help that we can get is welcome from a friendly country, especially where we have so much in common. That crime gun intelligence unit is very important to us because the crime guns are coming to us from American factories and American traffickers. We have two systems. In America, you could go in a store and buy a truckload of guns if you wish. In Trinidad and Tobago, it's a different system, but we have an interfacing. The people who are buying those guns know Trinidad and Tobago, are probably even citizens or family members of citizens, or they see us as a place where they can make profit. So we have a lot in common with the U.S. authorities. So interacting with them. I mean, a simple matter like the competence in cybersecurity is something that we can't claim that we have. We have to learn it. We have to send our people to be trained. So we can't pretend that we are what we are not.
Is that what the CIA and FBI are doing here? Is it manpower? Is it training? What exactly are they helping us? How are they helping us?
They are helping us to strengthen our institutions and to increase the capacity of our personnel, and also to track bad actors if and when they surface. Right?
Because last time you did mention like the international persons are liking us. Anything more to?
No, I won't say more about that at this time, because I mean, national security is not something that you put on the front page every day. There are issues that you have to digest and cogitate on before you go further in public statements.
I wanted to get back to my first question. The opposition since 2015 has supported 35 pieces of legislation.
That is their story.
But what makes you so sure that if you sit with them, that they will not support?
I have not said that I will not sit with them.
You personally.
But I have not said that. I have not said that. Too many people talking for me. If you're going to say what I say what I have said. I have said that the whole question of the government meeting with the opposition, I suggested in response to the idea when it came forward that we put two teams, a team from the government and a team from the opposition. And I proceeded to name the government team. This condition of that the Prime Minister has to be a part of the team, that is not my position. That is their condition. We name our team without the Prime Minister. They could name their team without the opposition leader, and we will meet. But there is no team before me other than my own.
So you're confusing me now. So are you personally prepared to be part of the team? Yes or no?
At an appropriate time, maybe I would, but not now.
So you opened it.
I have never closed it. I have said that we have two teams, and the government team, right? Look at it this way. It's not the first time. It's not the first time that a government team in any parliament would meet on any issue with an opposition team. You put people out there, they engage the issue, they see what both sides are talking about or what both sides want. And then you make progress towards something which comes back to the leadership, which says, well, look, this is what is before us, this is what we stand, this is what they stand on. And then you progress it to a state. If in that situation, they have to come back to the Prime Minister or to the leader, then what is wrong with that? What is the story about if the Prime Minister is not part of the team, he doesn't care about criminal and families who got killed? That is nonsense. All over the Commonwealth, government teams meet with opposition teams on all kinds of matters on a daily basis. It's only in Trinidad and Tobago you have this talk about, if you don't come in person, I'm not going to deal with you. That is not my position. That is their position.
You responded in a particular manner.
I responded by waiting for them to appoint their team. Look at the offense that they took by the fact that I said the Attorney General would convene and chair it. Oh no, they went at personal attacking the Attorney General. The Attorney General is one of the highest officers in the government. And if you have 8 people, he is the 9th one, he is the convener, he will bring them together and he will chair the meeting. What is wrong with that? What is wrong with that? And since you're all spending so much time asking me why I'm not going, why are you not spending some time asking the opposition leader why they're not naming the team? They're all afraid of them. No, it's because I'm in front of you all the time and they're always in hiding.
Last night, the
How
opposition
many
leader.
times have you stood in front of the opposition leader in a press conference? In the last 15 years. In the last 15 years. I'm in front of the press all the time, so you're asking me all about me and my thoughts, but I am only a part of the system. It's not about me. Really? Really?
You are the biggest party.
And that's why I have to be careful to preserve the institutional arrangement and the civil arrangement and the parliamentary arrangement. Maybe if I was in the opposition, I might have been just as responsible. But I've been there 3 times and I never was.
You are in a position to implement all the things.
I only have control over the members of the House that support me as Prime Minister. I have no control over other members, not even the independent members. The only members I have control over are the members on my side of the House that support me as the leader and the Prime Minister. If other parliamentarians are involved, ask them about their own conduct now.
Prime Minister, last night, the opposition leader, she invited you to join their anti-crime talks. Will you?
Their anti-crime talks. You think I really have time to go and puppy show myself around the country, the opposition leader? I mean, I have no problem if the opposition leader wants to meet with me, but this is just puppy show going on here. And you may not agree with me. You don't have to agree with me. I'm just telling what I think. Right?
But anti-crime talks, Prime Minister, a lot
But what, hold on.
citizens.
Why are you placing, what exactly do you expect to talk in those talks? What are you really expecting?
Citizens have expressed a lot of concerns about the crime situation. So, in that case...
Expressing concerns about the crime situation does not address the crime situation.
Prime Minister, that is for you to do. In terms of policy, implement policy to help the crime situation.
And when I bring policy to meet them, what do they do with it? You can't even appoint a team. The government has put in writing to our colleagues, these are the areas that the government think we could address and see if we can get common ground in there. They put 6 pages. I said, okay, this is what they want to talk about, so we want to talk about. And other things might emerge in the discussion. That is where we at. That's where we at. So why are you telling me about them over which I have no control? They chose to go down that road, going around the country, not having crime talks. They're campaigning for the next election, in case you didn't know. That's what that is. In the meantime, we will campaign too, you know. But in the meantime, we have a country to run, a government to run, we have facts to face, and that's what the government has to do.
Alina Dudnas from Loop News. Just a quick question. This is from the perspective of resources. You know, it's understood that there was the issue with back pay for the police officers recently. Also, the body cameras, there are a limited number. What is government doing to ensure, you know, in terms of resources that they're supported?
The government makes all the available resources that are affordable available to the police. As far as I'm aware, a significant amount of the back pay has been paid, and to the extent that their back pay not being paid, it is a result of records within the service, which they have to go through in a particular way, and as fast as they clear it up, people get paid. So that process is not being obstructed. The recording in the police service, the Minister of Finance did report, even after we put additional resources in to get the pay as quickly as possible, that there were still some entanglements of some people's records, right? The same thing happened with some teachers. So that's not a big problem as far as I'm aware. With respect to the other resources, the government has been putting increasing resources to the police service. And remember, we don't have an infinite amount of resources. Whatever resources we have to share between other important areas like health, education, the public debt, the social services, and so on. So there isn't an infinite amount. But the police service, as a matter of fact, the question you mentioned there about body camera, it appears as though it's not a question of not enough body cameras, it's not enough police officers to wear them. But that's another story.
On the question of resources, you had mentioned recently about $100 million to be targeted at hotspots. Any elaboration?
That's a program that we are working out, and it's programmatic. I mean, again, we have had work programs and specifically targeting programs. In this case, that pool of resources is to treat with certain specific resources and certain specific problems, and very soon you'll hear more about that.
Will that be done specifically under, I think you mentioned the Defence Force when you first announced it?
We will have the Defence Force involved in terms, because it's a security thing. Because the areas that are going to be benefiting from this are areas that are suffering from adequate security, and in that vacuum, certain things are happening which we want to address.
Who will exactly manage the funding or the resources, the allocation, to ensure it's allocated properly?
Well, some of the resources will ensure that the Defence Force has what it takes to be able to increase security in those particular areas and work alongside people who are doing certain things.
The causes of crime, will any of that money go towards addressing the causes of crime? Because the Joint Select Committee on National Security did have a big report that I have heard nobody refer, but it...
When we finalize how it's going to be done, you will be informed. But yes, for example, one of the things that we would hope to do in that program is to have people talk to people in the community, like family members, households, and so on, as to how they manage themselves and their children and their schooling and their own security and so on. And certain kinds of skills are required, and that fund will provide support for that. So it's not just a man with a gun.
At the start of the press conference, where you were quoting the manpower audit report, that most of the crime is committed in the night when a lot of...
I didn't say that. I said only 1,400 officers were on patrol at any one time. But we do know that most of those patrols are in the daytime, because police work 8 to 4.
Okay, but is it still true? The statistics at CAPA still support the view that most of the crimes take place at night? Because one of the things, just from an anecdotal point of view, so many of the crimes taking place are in the big daytime and in public places.
We do have that, but I think the last time I saw any assessment of that, nighttime was still the time when you were in greatest danger. But we have had an increase, certainly, we've had an increased frequency of crime out in the open. And that is one of the big concerns, that long ago, people would do crime hoping not to be identified or to be seen while they're doing it. But now you see a certain amount of brazenness that, being seen is not enough, because and that all that has to do, that grew with the whole question of witness tampering. I mean, people are afraid to be a witness, and the criminals know that. And of course, the more you make yourself bad, the more the witness is afraid of you. And therefore, in the absence of witnesses, this emboldens people to commit crime in the open. So that's a problem we have.
Because all that affects, I think, the detection rate, the number of hits being ordered from behind the prisons. I think that is another very serious problem, which I'm not sure what is being dealt with, how it's being dealt with. But
well, the answer to that is yes. The prisons, the communication between people who are incarcerated and their friends and family outside, that is a modern phenomenon in policing the prisons. There was a time when you go to prison, you stay there until you finish and come back and meet the family and meet the community. Now prisoners are basically fighting and demanding to remain in contact with the population from which they have been extracted. And I mean, that view, some people believe that's an entitlement. So we have to treat that as one of the new challenges. And I guess when you talk to the minister and the commissioner of prisons and other people, you can get more details on that. But that is in fact a problem, because the connection between people behind bars and people outside is a national security issue. Because if people can stay inside and give instructions to people outside, it defeats the whole purpose of a prison. Yeah? I mean, and then we go further, we have the drones, which I mean, I was told recently, in one instance, a drone came and dropped a gun in the prison. The technology of a drone wasn't here 20 years ago, but now, if you're not careful, someone could infiltrate the prison from the air and do something like that. And the prison officers are constantly having to be alert to these things.
We have the technology to monitor communications that take place within.
Yes, and of course, you must have seen recently where one officer acting on behalf of, I'm not sure he's acting on behalf of, making a fuss that the government had taken steps using technology to shut down the ability of cell phones to function in the prison. And somebody got up and make a big fuss about that. But that was one of the ways you try to control what is happening between the prison population and the external contacts of that population.
Talking about monitoring the conversations rather than shutting down.
I couldn't speak to that, but there are provisions in our law for, I think there are 3 or 4 officers who can authorize that, one of whom is the Commissioner of Police. Right?
Prime Minister, during your trip to the U.S., I'm just wondering, and I'm asking this because of a travel advisory or security alert issued to U.S. citizens following the shooting and murder incident that occurred in St. Augustine on the highway there, and specific reference was made to gang activity in certain areas and so on. Did any of the U.S. officials you spoke to, representing the U.S. government or Congress or so on, raise specific concerns about the issue of homicides or gang activity to you directly?
No, that did not come up in that specific way. We know everybody. The Americans have a very effective and efficient embassy in Trinidad and Tobago, and they don't have to talk to me about what happens in Trinidad and Tobago. They know exactly what's going on around, because we are a very open society. What we talked about is how do we deal with the problem of that experience, right? But in terms of advisories and so that didn't come up at all.
President, is there any presence on the ground in Trinidad and Tobago of authorities in the U.S., law enforcement authorities like the FBI, for example, presently here?
I am not in a position to speak to that. If you may want to speak to the Americans about that, because I mean, the fact that a man comes in a priest gown doesn't mean he's a priest. Yeah? So we don't get a report as to who is in the embassy. Right? The United States is a friendly country. They have a big mission here with a big mandate, and the staff come and go under the international regulations. So who's in the embassy? I mean, we don't really monitor that.
Prime Minister, just wondering, in terms of the issue, you talk about the police service and issues of resources and whatnot. In terms of the pay structure, I know there's a CPO process, but outside of that, is there a review or intention to look at that issue of whether for the police service, officers? Prisons, fire, the state security services in general, whether in fact, is it that it is enough, or is that something that could help in terms of morale? Or?
It will never be enough. But remember that the state has a payroll that applies to all the state's agencies and its officers, and everything is relative. You saw during COVID what happened with the nurses and doctors, and in the end we gave them an extra payment because of that extraordinary situation. But I mean, the police officers who are putting their lives on the line, but then it's logistically difficult to say, well, you put your life on the line, therefore you get this. But we were able to give the police a 4% increase in this payment that's going on there. They got their new salaries on the back pay, and we hope that we'll go into negotiations for the next triennium in an early time and get back to some semblance of regularity, so that it can be continuous improvement in their earnings and so on. But at this point in time, there's no thought of specifically extracting them and giving them extras. It's a wider issue for the government to try to maintain the earning power of its employees across the board. And that, again, is based on how well the economy does. Because without a good economy, the government can't pay these bills, which is why we focus on national security, the economy, health, education, all at once. Okay, last question.
Last question, Dr. Rowley. In your capacity as Prime Minister, head of the National Security Council, following your return from your trip to Washington, and circling back to why we're here in terms of the police service, its leadership, etc., have you had any interaction with Mrs. Hayward Christopher since your return? Any plans to engage with her on matters?
I haven't had any interaction with her, and most of my interaction with the Commissioner of Police is through the Minister, and I've been in touch with the Minister continuously. So I'm not ill-informed on anything that I should really be informed about. But I personally have not spoken to or been with Ms. Christopher, except to say that she's in a very difficult situation. She has a very difficult job, and even if, things don't go as well as we would like on a particular day, that does not mean that we should throw the baby out with the bathwater or behave as though, her efforts are to be ignored. Me?
Yeah.
Stay away from COVID. I went to PLM Fest last night.
Pardon?
Did you go to the PLM Fest last night? Or you missed the best fest? No, I'll be around a little bit, but I'm trying to be, COVID like me, right? So I'm serious. I've been to a couple of fests, but I kind of like try to stay away as I'm able to. I enjoy the music, I enjoy the camaraderie and the friends, but I kind of stay away from the crowd. I was in the PLM Fest last night. I did not go into the crowd deliberately because I'd hate to find myself with another bout of COVID. But I'll be around for Carnival. I'm not playing mass.
Prime Minister, we have COVID, we have Saharan dust, right, and you have crime. Is the government looking...
You equated those three things?
I mean, no, people are concerned about these three things at Carnival.
Well, okay, let's put it this way. Crime we're working on.
Right.
Carnival we involve in. Sahara dust we have no control over. Right?
And COVID-19.
Well, the COVID strains that are going around now, we're still keeping our fingers crossed that the strains are not, the symptoms are not very as aggressive as the Delta and other ones, but it's still around there, and somebody, like me who, not in my youth and have had it as often as most people would have acknowledged. I think I'll just not mix too much in the crowd, but I'll be around. Right? Thank you all very much, and thank you for cooperating and coming back today so we could have had this long discussion on such an important matter. Thank you very much.
The winning numbers in the National Lottery online draws for Tuesday, 6th February 2024 at 10:30 a.m. Playway, the number 19 horse, Mega Ultra Ball called with the Bacchanal Ball. Pick 2, the numbers 15 and 25 in that order, Mega Ball called. Pick 4, the numbers 7, 2, 1 and 6 in that order.
The national minimum wage of Trinidad and Tobago has been increased to $20.50 per hour from January 1st, 2024. No worker, including migrant workers, should be paid less than this wage. Visit www.labor.gov.tt for more on the new national minimum wage.